Today's episode of What's on Your Bookshelf is brought to you by Insignia Training Partners, the leaders in outsourced L&D talent and resources. Insignia is a full-service learning and development company that provides L&D talent to design, develop, and deploy your training solutions. Insignia specializes in providing the right resources for your projects at a fraction of the cost as opposed to bringing on new full-time employees. This includes fractional Chief Learning Officer services for enterprise training strategy, instructional designers to develop your training content and materials, facilitators to deliver in-person or virtual training to your staff, LMS administrators to manage the process, virtual training producers to make sure your virtual training is engaging and effective, and coaches to support the learning after training is completed. If you don't have a training department, that's okay. Insignia can be your bolt-on training department. With Insignia, you get dedicated resources providing fractional services by specialists in their field. Whether it's onboarding new hires, upskilling your team, or ensuring compliance, Insignia designs impactful programs that stick. Visit insigniatraining.com to discover their full range of services and to schedule a free consultation. Insignia is your partner for training success.
Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we are living out loud the pages of the books on our bookshelves. The book that we are exploring right now is called The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. My name is Denise Russo, and I'm here today with my co-host and friend, Sam Powell. And today is the day that we finish the Happiness Project book. It's the Afterword. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I think we say this every time we wrap up a book. It's like, I can't believe that we're here and this is where we're at. But I think that's I think that's the nature of it, right? Like we get so into it and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we've done the whole thing, which is crazy. But I'm excited to wrap this book up and then look ahead to the next book too. So that's what we'll do today, is do a little bit of both.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. So as you're thinking about this book, it got me to thinking, you were earlier telling me about having to do the laundry for Austin's baseball game. And we went to a baseball game recently as a family. And you never think about the ninth inning, but it's like when you get to the seventh inning and there's the seventh inning stretch and you feel like, oh, it's almost done, but then it could really go for a really long time afterwards. It got me thinking about how when we started this book, we plan out that we said, okay, there's this many chapters. Here's about how much we're going to have to do. But we didn't know till we got started how long these innings would run, right? Mm-hmm. Like there were some chapters that we thought, there's no way we can jam pack this into just 20 minutes. We're going to have a 2-episode deal here. So I think we're doing pretty good to get us to the end of the year with what we're going to describe next. But I want to make sure we set people up for success for how to take this book. And even though we lived it out loud this year, that they'll also be able to live it out loud for themselves next year. So Sam, why don't you share a little bit about what you took away from the Afterword, but I'd love if you could also share what we're hoping people can do to take action themselves next year.
Yeah, and her Afterword is very short. It's not even 2 full pages. And it really just is kind of a wrap up of what she's doing. But then after that, she does give like her Happiness Project manifesto and then a bunch of like little tips on things she learned along the way, which are all, which were great little tips. And a lot of them just align with things we've already learned, right? Like things from Atomic Habits. So one of her tips for, what was it? It was for sticking to a regular exercise routine. Her number 2 tip was never skip exercising 2 days in a row. I mean, that's exactly what we were taught in Atomic Habits, is never miss twice, right? Yeah. So, it's funny that the things that she discovered on this journey are things that, it sounds like our truths, right? We are rediscovering them, as we go. So there's some really good stuff in that. But I love that she kind of just gave us a little bit of an update on just the different things that were going on in her life in the Afterword, about kind of what action she's taken beyond that, right? Like, what are the updates of the things that she mentioned in the book that people would be curious about? And she ends it with, and now I'm off to live my happily ever after. And I just loved that. So it was a very cute, like, hey, here's a wrap up on so much of what she had said. It reminds me of like the bonus epilogue, like in a book, right, where it's like the book's over, but you get like just a little bit more of like, where are they 10 years from now, or like something like that. So it just kind of reminded me of that, and I thought it was really cute. But I love that she then goes into your happiness project, right? And she says each person's happiness project will be unique, but it's the rare person who can't benefit from starting one, right? So everybody's project, and like as we've seen in this, right, she picked a key resolution for each month, and then the activities that went along with that, the resolutions that went along with that to make her happy. And so she gives this, like as we've read this book, she gives this beautiful framework on what you could do if you wanted to spend a year on your own project. And you wouldn't even have to do it a year if you didn't want to, right? You could shorten the time frame. Like, it's very adjustable, but it gives you this space of, if you really wanted to be intentional on this, if you really wanted to take action on this, then there's basically a blueprint in this book on how to do that. And she acknowledges straight from that, where she talks about your happiness project, is that this has to be unique to you. You have to pick the activities, you have to pick the resolutions that matter to you, right? That move you in the right, in the right direction. And I think that if you go back to the how of happiness, we give you many, many, many options and assessments that can help you figure out which ones of those you might want to focus on. Like if you're totally lost, if it's something that doesn't, you don't have ideas to kind of get started. But that's, I think, really what we want to help people with is, how can you get started? How can you do this yourself?
I had a mentor once years ago that said to me, you could wash your car in your driveway, right? And it was sort of like a rhetorical, like sarcastic comment in a way, because of course I thought, yes, I could wash my car. I didn't have time to do it that particular day, but the conversation then said, you could clean your own house, right? Well, yes, we just talked about laundry, dishes, etc. He said, you could do all of those things, but why is it then that there is a booming marketplace for car washes and housekeeping services? Mm-hmm. Because if you want to capture the best of your life and the best time in your life, you could transfer those tasks to experts that could take on some of that burden for you. And so you could read this book, live out your own happiness project. I could tell you with full confidence, as not only someone who read the book and someone hosting this podcast and someone who's spent almost 20 years in leadership and life development, that I didn't intentionally, with urgency and sustainability, do a happiness project the first time I read the book. This is my second time reading the book now. Mm-hmm. And why is that? I think it's because I didn't have an accountability partner and or a coach when I read the book the first time. Mm-hmm. Going through it this second time, because I have all kinds of notes and scribbles and highlighter marks and pages and stuff in here folded over, I've come to realize that the only way to live out loud, which we say at the beginning of every podcast, it's a life and leadership podcast where we live out loud the pages of the books on our shelves, is that to become happier, you have to have a plan. To have an atomic habit, you have to have a strategy and a system. And in order to accomplish all of that, it's easiest if you also have a coach. And mm-hmm. So what Sam and I want to propose to you is, whether it is the two of us or not, is not the piece to this puzzle. We're not here to sell you on anything. But what we are here to share with you is that we've read the book, we've walked through it together, we've learned this book, we've now taught this book, and we can take all of these books that we've shared over the last 2 years and help you through the lens of us being multi-certified as coaches to craft your own plan, whether that's a plan for your life and leadership, for your habit stacking and tracking, for your happiness, whatever it might be. Maybe it's that you want to get promoted at work, or you want a different job, or maybe you want some other element of a solution to a challenge or opportunity in your life. Reach out to us, because it's hard to do it alone. Even if we just talk to you and give you a couple of tips and tricks, this book has tips and tricks. But again, walking through that with a coach can elevate your success measures on this, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like when we use frameworks, right? Like she gives in this book, when we use these resources, and she's got great resources on her website. So if you go to GretchenRubin.com, you can find /resources is all the resources, /books is all of her books. She has a lot more now in a lot of different spaces. She has some interesting ones that I think I'd like to add to my to be read list, but she's really, it's been years since she published the book. And so there is just a lot there. So I think that when you use these frameworks, when you use these resources, and when you find someone to help you, whether that's just a friend that's your accountability buddy, or whether that's a professional, that's a coach, or whether that's a mentor who's gone down the road you're trying to go down before, everybody needs different things, but I always say it lowers the cost of entry to, to the game that you're trying to play, right? It's like finding the discount tickets to, to get into the arena, to go watch the event. It helps you just start faster, right? And the key is starting. The key is taking action and taking forward momentum. And, so I think we really encourage people as you're thinking about this book, if you've gone on this journey with us, if you haven't, go back, go listen to the episodes, go on the journey with us. But think about, what could your happiness project look like, right? And what's one thing you could commit to now to get started, right? Whether that's go download some of her resources, whether that's talk to Denise or I to get, some suggestions, whatever, we're here to help you. But just think about, what is that one thing that you could do, that you could resolve to do, right? She talks about resolutions, and how could you then implement that to move forward? It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to commit to the entire project if you don't want to. But if there's this sense in you that, hey, I could be happier than I am, that's the encouragement, is that we just want you to have the best version of your life, the best version of who you are, right? That's what I want for all the people in my life. And so it's that question of, what's the one thing you could do to get on the trajectory, right? That's what we talked about in Atomic Habits, is you should be far more concerned with the trajectory than your current position. How can you get on the trajectory of a happier life? And again, this is a great framework. Her happiness project is a great framework to do that.
We're almost to the end of the year. And so now is a time when often people will look back on everything that they've done, accomplished, didn't accomplish. They reflect on it, and then they start to think about what to do in the next year. In business, that's what happens, is people start doing their goal planning and goal setting in January, which is a little bit too late, because now Q1 has already started. People start resolutions on January 1. They usually drop them by February 1. Maybe the idea here is, think about now, what's going to be your intention? How can you, with intention, map out what you want to do, even if you just do it for the first quarter of next year, January, February, and March? What are 3 things? 3 things anybody can do, 3 things. 3 things that you could focus on once a month for those 3 months that would elevate your baseline happiness. We've taught about how to know your baseline in the How of Happiness. And there's assessments for free in Dr. Sanja's book. We've talked about how you can solve for happy if your mind is stuck and you're trying to overcome significant obstacles through Mo Gaudad's book. We've talked about the ideas that Gretchen had as she walked through her own journey. But now this is an opportunity for you to take all of that and create and craft your own project. And I know that it's not easy for some people to journal. It's not in their conscious competence to do that, or maybe they don't like to do it. But this is simply saying 3 things. what are 3 simple things that you can do? She says it could be as simple as just putting your keys away in the same place when you come home every day.
Mm-hmm.
Would that make you happier, or would it make your life easier? Would it save you time to be able to do something else? Whatever these 3 things are, it's a great challenge to think about. Could you just write those 3 things down? If you don't have a planner and you don't have a way to track it, I use the Passion Planner. We put a coupon every single week in every single episode of how you could get one if you want one. They're so confident in that product. The company gives them away for free if you just want to download and print them off your own computer. But Sam, you have a really interesting journal that you bought that you didn't know when I said, hey, let's do this book, that you also had this other book. So why not share for a moment this other book that you have that actually goes with this in case people want to try that?
Yeah, and we talked about it a little while ago because I think she formally created it after the book was written. But it's the Happiness Project. It's a 1 sentence a day journal that it's a 5-year thing. So you write down one thing that you're happy about every single day, right? And so that you get to go back and reflect. And again, it's a very low cost of entry, very easy to do. What's one thing that made you happy today? And just that self-reflection and getting into that space of consciously thinking about it sets you up to then want to take action, to be motivated to take action, to think about, even just cross your mind that happiness is a concept that you can be greatly influencing in your life through your actions, right? As we learned in the How of Happiness, it's 40%. 40% of your happiness comes from your intentional activities and actions. And that's really what, that's what this journal, I think, helps you do, is bring your happiness into a daily conscious. And it's literally you writing down 1 sentence what does it take you 30 seconds to write a sentence? It's very, very easy, but it's the habit, right? So go back to Atomic Habits if you're trying to figure out how do I get this in here, but couple it with something, right? Maybe it's when you get your morning cup of coffee, the journal's right next to it, and you write the thing from yesterday. What was the one thing yesterday that made you happy, right? Or maybe it's next to your bed and you do that before you take your glasses off at night, or before you turn your light off at night, or before you plug your phone in at night. But finding those activities to couple together and really get into it. But I think the thing that we're really trying to encourage you is to take some kind of action, because I think that that's what this book taught us, is that if you think you're happier, you are. And if you take the actions to contribute, to put you on a trajectory of happiness, you will be happier. But you have to do something. You can't just listen along with us and think about it. You have to take a step. You have to take a step to get you on the path. And when you're on that path, go pick those 3 things, right? Pick the 3 things you're going to do in January. Pick the 3 things you're going to start next month, right? Whenever you want to do this for you, but take some action and get moving. And if you need help, that's what coaches are for. That's what accountability buddies are for. That's what, mentors are for. That's where you got to get outside of yourself and have that external, influence to keep you accountable to moving forward.
I think you made a really good point, Sam, about action is action. So whether it's a small action, like just writing down a word, or whether it's a big and audacious action, it's still action. It's still movement. It's still moving you forward, and be proud of those moments, even if they're little ones. Now, you took a really big actionable step on something last year that happened because of something that happened many years prior. So several years ago, well, I'll back it up even before that, 22 years ago, somebody handed me my very first ever John Maxwell book. It was before Olivia was even born. And I didn't know then that I would become enamored with his books and his writing style and the way that I could change my life through the things that he was teaching in very practical ways. I didn't know that fast forward, I would be able to become a part of his team and sit on the President's Advisory Council and be able to coach many thousands of people through his teachings. Then many, many years later, I ended up having an opportunity to have an experience with you, Sam, before we were working together officially, really, where you got a glimpse of John Maxwell and the power of some of his books. And then we had a couple of episodes on Let's Be Real where we talked about John Maxwell books. I was teaching John Maxwell's materials inside of our former job together. And one day you took a very big actionable step and decided that you also wanted to get certified as a leadership expert and coach through John's materials. And so tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you to take intentional action on something and what we're headed into next week.
Yeah. So, when I was making the transition out of my corporate career and into what I do now, I was looking for different types of training, certification that we could do, and was interested in the leadership space. That's where my passion lies, and was looking specifically around coaching because that's what I knew I wanted to do. That's where I knew I could help people the most. And you had mentioned the John Maxwell stuff, and I didn't realize when I signed up for it. I was like, okay, this sounds great. Like, right, it's a self-paced thing. There, it all like culminates in a conference. I was like, sounds really good, right? Like, lovely, right? It checks all my boxes of things that I wanted. I just didn't realize how much content came along with the certification and access to being able to teach his books and his topics. I've done lunch and learns with them, things like that. And it's great content. It's very practical, very straightforward. I feel like we're trying to sell John Maxwell stuff, which we're not. We just both like it. But I think the thing that resonates is that John is a very intentional person, right? And he's someone who steps into action all the time, like we said, right? Like if you want something in your life, if you want to do something, you have to be able to go do it, right? It's not the trying, it's not the wishing, it's not the hoping, it's the doing that makes things happen. And I think that John's a really good example about that. Like if you read about his life, about just his daily routines, I mean, he like lives out atomic habits, like, all that sort of good stuff of just like, you have to take the action to do it. And so what we thought, like we've gone through these 3 books about what's all the science behind happiness, what's an equation, right? A kind of a different perspective on how we're happy, how you get out, into that default state of happy. And then watching Gretchen go through her own happiness project, right? She's doing a similar journey, like studying what we were doing, but then here's how she implemented it, giving you a really nice blueprint into something super tangible to take action. Mm-hmm. And really what we think about, and I think we've used the word 15 times in this episode already, is intentionality, right? Being intentional on what you want to do and how you take action. And so the next book that we're going to explore is really taking that a step further. It's John Maxwell's book called Intentional Living, and is really about how do you take control of your story, right? Now that we've learned what it takes to make you happy, now that we've watched people go through their journeys, now that we've got all these resources and we're sitting on this great pile of stuff to do, now it's how do we take action? How do we really do that? And what does that blueprint look like in a very purposeful way, right? And so that's what we're going to explore next, is Intentional Living. And you said it's one of your favorite books. I had never read it before. It was one of the ones that was on my shelf but not read. So I pulled it off the shelf. I've read the first few chapters before we get started here. And I'm loving it so far because it really is talking about what we're talking about, the stepping into doing, the stepping into action, you've got to, just be very intentional about what you're doing. And I'm really excited to explore the book because he breaks it down into like a 4-step process. He's like, as I've done this, as I've helped other people, there's basically this roadmap that pops out every time. And so that's what we're going to go through. And I'm really excited because I think it's such a great way to end the year so that when January comes, when the start of the next year comes, when we explore the next books on our shelf, which we already have all planned out, and I'm very, very excited about, that you can step into that with all the knowledge on how to be happy and how to live the life that you want. I think this is just the perfect way to kind of pull it all together and help you step into action as you begin the next year.
I'm really excited about it as well. It's hard to say what are my favorite books because John's written over 100 books but it's definitely Intentional Living's in my top 5 of my favorite John Maxwell books. And I want to encourage you, if you're listening, if you have kids, whether they're young kids like elementary age school or even in college, when I read the book at the time, my kids were in elementary school. Maybe one of them was just starting middle school. So the book is not brand new. My kids are both in college now, but I have to tell you without a shadow of any doubt that it changed all 3 of our lives when we walked through this book together. And you can go through an intentional living exercise experience with people that you love the most and transform together. This is about really looking at how to take, like Sam, that you said, all of these elements of forming good character and values, like we taught with John Wooden, looking at the ways to get a structure and a system in place with your habits, and building up these markers and conscious awareness of your baseline happiness and how to elevate that. Intentional living is a great way for us to close out this year, because we've got November, which is a month of, as we talked about just 2 weeks ago, November was the month in the Happiness Project of gratitude and reflection and thankfulness and all the things we think about, especially in the United States with the holiday time around Thanksgiving, and then moving into Christmas and it being about gifting yourself the opportunity to grow and to learn and to elevate your mind and your heart. So I'm really excited about Intentional Living because it's not only just one of my favorite books, but it's my favorite because of what it did for me and my family. So looking forward to sharing that with you next time. Scott will have a link in the show notes if you want to get a copy of the book. And you never have to get copies of the books to listen to the podcast. We are not here peddling other people's books and selling their books. And we're not here as, even as Sam, you said very nicely earlier, we're not here trying to sell our services. However, there are resources like books and our services that if it helps you, we want you to be able to have easier access. I love that you said you called it the cost of low entry, that if you need help or you want resources, that's the reason this podcast started. It all started because people asked me recommendations for books that I had already read that I got value from. So next week comes one that I got a lot of value from, and I'm super excited to share that with you. Friends, thank you for being with us today. It really helps us if you subscribe to the podcast and share it with others so that we could reach more people. But even more importantly than that, we'd love to hear from you and hear about how this is adding value to your life. Thanks for telling me the story today, Sam, about Grandma and all that she's done to help us be able to take those herbal essence moments and spread it to their friends and their friends and their friends, because this is truly about conscious living and elevating our mindset, our heart set, and our lives with the people that we care about the most. So friends, thank you again for being with us. My name is Denise Russo. On behalf of my good friend Sam Powell, this has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.